Hey guys, thanks for joining us for another episode of the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. Today we're talking about questions from an Enneagram skeptic because I know, and I have been hearing all year that there have been people who occasionally come up to probably you as a listener, me as a host, and ask about the Enneagram. Tell me more about it. Where is it from? And maybe you don't know that answer. Maybe you're like me and you're like, I'm moving on. I'm a thinking forward type, and I'm just trying to use this awesome tool to help couples or yourself in your own marriage. But today I'm taking time to address those questions. You guys have heard me say before that Wes has a theology background. My husband, he also has a passion for helping people who maybe don't understand about the Enneagram. So I wanted to give that question, that skeptic's question, a voice today. And I wanted to just stop and sit with it. And Wes has some very good ways that if you're looking to understand more yourself about the Enneagram origins, or even just talk to somebody on a very brief level about what they might have questions about, or a quick example you could give from the medical sciences or any kind of science or art that you might even be able to use on a very brief level with them from today's episode, man, that would be awesome. And it's perfectly timed with our book because if you're out there sharing about the Enneagram and marriage at all on any level, thank you, just thank you. First of all, I hope it's helpful to you and to anyone you share it with. But next, you'll be able to give a little quick example of, oh yeah, this is why I think that it's a safe tool to use if somebody ever does question that. So I hope that it helps those of us who share a faith to love God with all of our heart, mind, soul, strength. You heard me say mind. I love that part of it. But really, like, sitting with this question is a gift for me too, because I really do tend to trust science. And it was helpful for me even to learn about the backdrop of what's up with this tool and to really allow myself to sit with the origins as I learn from people that have done a lot of work on this, like Tyler Zach, and also, of course, like Jesse Eubanks. So I'm thankful to those gentlemen out there who have already kind of laid some foundation. And now today we bring Wes on, who has this gift of theology, science, type one, just kind of really at that clarifying level. So I feel like we've got all of it now wrapped up for you in a fun episode where we get, if you like research like I do, it's a fun episode to really get to nerd out together a bit and to have some practical ways that we can address why the Enneagram itself is a good tool to use for personality. But let's caveat this with not the only tool. We don't beat up our spouses with it. So, okay, well, let's talk to Wes. Hi, guys. We're so excited to give you another episode of the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. I'm so grateful to have Wes today. You guys know Wes, my hubby. Hi, Wes.
Hey, how's it going?
So glad to have you. We're talking about questions from an Enneagram skeptic today because I actually got one of those on this book lunch right at the beginning from a friend. And I thought, you know what? This is a good time. She had some legitimate questions about the Enneagram. This is probably a long time in the making. Like, you can see that this topic isn't one that always fascinates me, but is probably very important. And that is a long time coming. How relevant and valid is the Enneagram? And especially for those who are concerned that there might be some stipulations about using the Enneagram. So today I'm posing questions as though I'm an Enneagram skeptic, and Wes is going to be answering them because Wes is
I'm
very,
going to do my best.
he's logical. He has a master's in theology from Wheaton College. He doesn't talk about this side of his life as much because he ended up going into medicine, but it's like where a lot of people end their career is with that master's in theology. And you could have done that.
Yeah. And I think that the Enneagram is a really interesting interface between science,
Mhm.
psychology, and faith.
Mhm.
And so it's going to be fun to think that through.
Yes, it is. And it really is because a lot of times, even on Instagram, I'll get people to say to me, why are you bringing God in? Which I don't all the time, but when I do, remember to bring God in because the holy ideas are part of the Enneagram. I can remind them actually, this is a system that is actually for people to become better versions of themselves by approaching their virtues and letting go of their vices slash passions slash sin. So it becomes a tool that has some spiritual implications. And, like I said, I often forget to talk about that because I'm so busy hacking through. but I really am happy you're here to
Me
shed some light
too.
on this, especially as we book launch, because we
Mhm.
know we'll get even more of that.
Oh yeah.
And everybody here who's been part of this community for any amount of time, you guys are maybe have heard these questions before yourself. So thank you, Wes. I'm so grateful.
I'm glad to be here. It's
Yes.
going to be good.
Yes. And let's start with the big question that people get about the shape of the Enneagram. I think that a lot of times people wonder about that, and they might even ask, is this a pentagram?
So yeah, I mean, the Enneagram shape itself is, to the uninitiated, if it's not something you're used to seeing, it looks strange. I mean, it's got these what seem to be random points. It's got a circle around it. If all you've ever seen in terms of diagrams of sharp pointy objects with a circle around them is a pentagram, which is used in the occult and Satanism, then yeah, you at first glance you might be like, whoa, 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 what is this?
Mm.
But slow down, slow your roll, and let's think this through. There's a lot of interesting diagrams that you could make that look kind of like an Enneagram in a lot of other areas of life. If you're really looking for it, I work in medicine. And what a lot of people don't know is that when you read an EKG, it's telling you a lot in this squiggly line. It might just look like a random squiggle to you, but to somebody who's been studying that, and we have studied EKGs for many decades, and we've analyzed it so that we can tell the flow of electricity goes in certain directions in the heart. And there's actually 3 axes, and you can make those with a circle, and you can draw a diagram showing where that flow of electricity is going through the heart and represent it that way. And if you were to draw it out to somebody who's uninitiated, they'd be like, what is that? Especially if it wasn't labeled,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
it's just like a circle with lines and angles and stuff, like, what in the world? But
Mhm.
to a electrophysiologist, to a cardiologist, oh yeah. And look, that guy's got a left axis deviation,
Yeah. Yeah.
like he would know exactly what that means, and it would be a very useful tool. It's just one way of representing some other ideas that we all accept and know to be true. So I think this is what we need to do, is just slow down and say, okay, why is it drawn this way? Why does it have that shape? Well, there's good reason. In the Enneagram, in this system of personality typing, there are 9 personality types. And it seems to be accurate, based on our experience, based on the experience of so many people who study the Enneagram. It seems like there's 9 personality types. So how do they relate to each other? You could either draw them all on a line, like a number line straight across, and that would be helpful, just to see them represented there. But in terms of how they relate to each other, so if you look carefully, you'll see that each Enneagram number, each type, has a tendency to act like one of the other types when they're in times of stress, or when they're in times of health. They might act like one of the other numbers, and it's very a predictable thing. Like for me as a type 1, when I'm really feeling stressed, I tend to go to a 4 space where I'm acting overly emotional, maybe throwing myself a little pity party or something.
The comment, I'm jealous, has been stated innumerable
Yes.
times.
but and that's not to say that's
No,
what
right.
4s are like all the
Right.
time, but that's like kind of like a
He's in
4 trait,
stress.
to be
Right.
like overly emotional at times. So, and then in times of health, 1s go to 7, and I'll be a lot more spontaneous, a lot more fun, and so on. So if you were to put all of the numbers, the 9 numbers, in a circle, and then draw an arrow from the 1 to the 4 and to the 7, there would be like this little, like a triangular shape there. You do the same for all 9 types, and you get the shape of the Enneagram. That's where it comes from. Ennea means 9, and gram means like shape or a drawing of something. So that's it. Nothing mystical about it, nothing magical. It's just, this is just a practical way of laying out, like in a diagram, like, or a map, if you will, how the Enneagram types relate to each other.
Right. And it
So,
doesn't mean without the mystery of God. It doesn't mean it's without the mystery of God in that there is, God is still a mystery, but we have ways of knowing God. And so people may say, but I use it as, a mystical aspect of my faith. And we can't predict how other people will use the system, but we're just saying this is how we use the system, is very logically
Mm,
and very scientifically in that way. It's not a science, but there is science you can apply from it relationally. We can do a lot of qualitative research on the
right.
Enneagram to say, like you said, many ones act this way, if not most.
Right.
And we have so much qualitative research. Now, Trudy has done so much research,
Right.
thousands upon thousands of couples and
Right.
individuals to show us this is accurate. And so it's very helpful as a way to counter all of the middle marriage and early marriage
Right.
strife that we see that
Exactly.
lands people in a well of trouble. And we'll talk more about that on this interview. But thank you.
Yeah.
That was a creative way to share it about the EKG. I noticed you also helped me on my FAQ page. Now, if you want to visit our website, we'll put it in the show notes. But you also helped me to remind people that the 5-pointed star has a lot of different views
Yeah,
as well.
exactly. So yeah, 5-pointed star is used in a pentagram for satanic worship or in Wiccan religion, but it doesn't have to be used that way. I mean, we use 5-pointed stars, doodling in our notes to highlight something, or we give gold star to kids, when they're doing something well to reward them, and we have 50 gold or 50 white stars decorating our American flag. I mean, these are all really wonderful uses of this geometric shape. Geometric shapes don't have moral value in and of themselves. They're neutral things that God made, that he allowed us to discover, so that we can then, with our free will as moral creatures, we can then use these neutral things for good or evil. You can use the 5-pointed star to give a kid a gold star, or you can use it to worship the devil. What you do with that is up to you. Hopefully not the latter. And when it comes to the Enneagram, you will find people in the world. I mean, there's a lot of people. So you will find people, if you look on the internet, who are off on the fringe, and they're using it to try to justify weird things. And you know what? You're just going to have to be like, I tell my kids, when you go online and you're getting information, you have to learn how to eat the meat and spit out the bones.
Yes.
You have to be careful and think critically about, why is it that somebody is saying something? Is it really justified? Is this the right way that we should go about it, and so on? So yeah, the Enneagram, in my mind, in the way we use it, is as an objective, neutral tool that we are going to then try to practically use, so that just we can live better, so that we can be better husbands and wives, better parents.
Yes. And that really speaks to the next question we get sometimes. And that one actually does have some depth to it. At first, you might not realize, but it's the question about, whether I should use this tool to, put myself in a box, or maybe that person who says, I don't want to be labeled. I hate that. And yet we also understand, and of course, different faiths look at this differently, but for those of us who practice a Judeo-Christian faith, and I practice a Christian faith, we do have this responsibility, and this is just a good reminder to steward what we're learning. And I recently got to listen to the awesome Jesse Eubanks episode, where somebody who didn't used to like the Enneagram was on, talking about the fact that they do now. And one of the best reasons they gave was, we're supposed to be held accountable to growth. And this is a really good tool for doing that. And it might make people uncomfortable, but that brought me to one of the best arguments that I thought that you had for it, when you talked about just 23andMe and all that. If you could talk to that for a minute.
So the question specifically is, what if I don't want to be labeled and put inside of a box?
Yes, exactly.
A lot of our people that I've talked to about the Enneagram, just asking, have you heard of this? Like, oh yeah, I heard of it. I just don't want to be labeled. I don't want to be put in a box. I think that is a totally legit thing to be wary of in any labeling of any kind. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things that can be labeled and maybe should be labeled about us, that can be very useful. I mean, you can't get away from having certain traits. We have certain genetic traits. We have certain express, like I have bluer eyes. She has browner eyes, like just the way I'm made, I have a genetic makeup. And with newer tools like 23andMe, or the ones you can order from ancestry.com or others, you can now see, how far does that go into your ethnicity. You can even learn what kind of health conditions you might have a propensity for. If you let things run its course and you don't take any intervention, you might be at risk of this or this. And so some people, they don't want to know. They're like, you know what? Ignorance is bliss in this way. I'd rather not know and just let whatever's going to happen, happen. And you know what? That's your right. That's your prerogative. You can do that. But for a lot of people, they do want to know, for the same reason that I encourage all of my patients to come in for an annual physical every year, to do a routine annual panel of blood work. Why? You don't always feel it when something's out of order. I mean, you could have elevated white blood cells, you feel fine, but there's some leukemia brewing there, or you have anemia and you need more iron, or you're prone to bleeding, your platelets are low. You know what I'm saying? I could give you so many examples where you don't feel it. But if you were to look for it and label it, listen, you have a label right now. You have anemia and you could, if you want, you could do something about it. And you know what? If you started taking iron, you're going to have more energy. You're going to feel so much better, and you're going to be able to live better because you labeled that and you addressed it.
Yeah.
I imagine the same goes for you with all of your years of counseling. People who've, maybe it's not about nature, but nurture, the way you were brought up or the experiences you've had. You've maybe been through some traumatic experiences. And so those things are influencing you. They're affecting you, whether you like it or not, or realize it or not. And like an iceberg, we get to see on the surface this little piece of you, but that piece is being moved. It's being influenced and swayed by an undercurrent of your genetics, your upbringing, your experiences that you've had in your lifetime. And so, like Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. I wouldn't say maybe not worth living, but it could be so much better if you took a minute to think about all the things that make you tick, and including your personality type. If you figure this out, if you label your personality type using whether it's the Enneagram or one of the other personality typing systems, it just gives you some more structure. It gives you some guidance. I have some direction, like, okay, I've been feeling my way through this like we did. I mean, how many arguments did we have over the 22 years we've been married that we were just trying to stumble our way through and figure out, like, so frustrating. You always do this. And I always do this, well, now I can see why.
Right.
Type 1s always do this, type 7s, they usually act like this.
Right.
And just having that understanding, our eyes were open. It's like, oh my goodness, I have so much more sympathy for you now. I have an easier time understanding where you're coming from and predicting in a helpful way, so that I can maybe encourage you in those things that you're naturally good at. I can help you to avoid those natural pitfalls that you'll tend to be prone to, and vice versa,
Yes, definitely vice versa.
Okay. All right. You know what? You
I'm
always
sorry.
do that.
No, but I mean, like, yes, body types are good clarifiers. So even when I was like, tell us about 23andMe, you're like, well, here's the right question. It's like, that's what you're good at. Like, that is how you do life. And I think that there's so many good things to each side too.
Right.
And I tend to be positive outlook. So I'm like, oh, there's the good part of your
Well,
personality.
this is a positive outlook. So
Thank you.
here's a positive spin on labeling something like your personality. Now there's another question in a question there. So you said, I don't want to be labeled and put in a box. So the put in a box part is, I think, separate from the labeling part. So we all have things that we could be labeled with, like without doing 23andMe, I already know, like, I got 25% or so Italian in me because my grandfather is 100% Italian. I have certain amount of this other ethnicity and this other one, and so on. And my dad's side of the family, they're from Kentucky. And so there's these Southern roots and certain cultural things that go along with that. And these are all things that someone could come along and say, well, I'm going to be prejudiced against you because you have this ethnicity or this culture, or you could celebrate those things as good things, you know? And the same goes for every other trait you've labeled. I mean, you could discriminate against somebody for having eye color or hair color or skin color or being a certain body shape or height or all the things kids get made fun of for on a playground. It's like, that happens. And the same could go for personality type according to the Enneagram. So it's a legitimate concern. We all need to be careful as people to not discriminate against people, to not limit people, to not put them in a box based on their personality type or anything else, but instead to see this as like a hand of cards that you've been dealt, that you now have the free choice to choose and the power to choose. How do you want to play this hand? Now, what are you going to do from here? Right? It's like a skeleton that you now get to grow out from in whatever direction you want. And that's a beautiful thing. It's not a box. It's more like a lattice work or a skeleton,
Yes, it's true. And when people worry that the Enneagram is going to harm their spouses, I just want to say this from the marriage counselor sort of perspective. Don't force it upon them. They don't have to encompass that. We are more expansive than just our nuanced personality types.
That's right.
Even though Wes said, yes, it's helpful, you have to give people freedom. And oh my gosh, there's nothing more important to me than freedom as a 7. So please give them freedom. Show them how you're growing and doing your work so that they can want that. If there's going to be any growth at all, they don't have to use the Enneagram for it. But if they're going to want to work on their vices in any capacity, you could just say, I know you don't like the Enneagram, but do you have the vice of anger, or do you have the vice of gluttony, so that they can really work on those things? Yeah. So, but sometimes people even ask one more question, and that is, and this goes over a bit of what we shared, but I think it's worth repeating and even adding to, do we feel that there's any occult or numerology in the Enneagram? So just talk on that for a second. I know we got to talk on it a little bit.
Right. There's more that could be said, though. That's a good point. So like I said earlier, there are some people out on the fringe, some strange people who are using the Enneagram to try to justify or to fit inside of their worldview that might be, part of the occult, astrology, numerology. I mean, so we don't do that. I don't think that it's justified to do that. I don't think that if you look deeply into the history of the Enneagram that you'll find that it comes from astrology or numerology. There's a really good video that Tyler Zach made on this, and you can link to that in the description. But he does a really thorough and great job of showing, where there's no evidence for that. But I would say, okay, I have a couple of reasons why this is not, astrology or numerology. One, like we said before, numbers, shapes, they have no value in and of themselves, like as far as moral value, they're just neutral things, that you can then apply in moral ways. You can use the understanding of mathematics to make technology that you can then use the technology to hurt people or to help people. And the Enneagram's kind of like that. It's a useful tool that's neutral that you could then use to discriminate against people, or you can use it to help people, like we just said. But also in astrology, you have this influence from the stars. Like there's nothing about that in the Enneagram. We're claiming nothing like that. And not only that, in astrology, because of this continual influence, you have a horoscope, you have these ways of predicting the future, and saying someone has a destiny or a certain fate that's inescapable. And that's just not at all justified. There's no scientific evidence for that. And there's no reason to say that the Enneagram is supporting anything like that. Now you are born with certain or maybe developed in you certain raw materials that as a Christian, I would say is the way you are specially created by your loving God, just like we all have different gifts, that he gives us that can be used for good. But that's something you then get to decide. What are you going to do with going forward. It's not like a destiny or a fate.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, now how am I going to use this? I get to choose. And in
Mhm.
astrology, you don't get to choose, you know?
Right.
So in numerology, you think numbers are some holy, thing like that. There's nothing like that in the Enneagram on its own. And honestly, I don't think the Bible supports that either. But if you were to try to apply that and say, oh, well, certain numbers are good or evil. I mean, look,
Look, I'm just going to say this 7 is a good number in the Bible.
this is the number of completion. Yep. So
just kidding though, but
and
literally
who doesn't want to be one, right? Number one.
right. So I think that it really makes us all appreciate just the order, the structure of the
Yeah.
Enneagram. I love how you also share that when we are studying algebra, that we have origins with ancient Babylonian Muslims, that when we're studying, you talked about Newton, you talk about, geometry. Tell us a
Sure.
couple more
Okay.
examples from those. I love those
You got it.
examples.
You got it. Right. But real quick, like that, in numerology, like if you were to try to apply that to this, which I don't think does, but the number 5, which is the 5-pointed pentagram, does that mean 5 is evil? I mean, there's 5 love languages. How many people out there like that book and think, if you drew those in a shape of a star or something, you could do that.
Well,
But
we
that
talk
wouldn't be
about the
justified. It wouldn't
7
be right.
lifestyles now.
Okay.
Next 7. Okay, sorry.
But the
Back
number
in
9,
focus.
the
Yes.
number 9 is not evil in and of itself. I
right.
mean, if you're coming from a Christian perspective, there's 9 fruits of the Holy Spirit
Mhm.
that's mentioned in Galatians 5. So like we don't think these numbers have any moral
No,
value, but even if you
intrinsic
did, 9 is not an evil number. Okay.
None of them are.
No, they're all just
They're
neutral.
symbols. Right. Right. Yeah. So tell us about the other things. I love those
Okay.
examples. And I feel like those are quick examples. If any of our listeners or viewers on YouTube just feel like, what's one quick thing I could say? I feel like these things I briefly mentioned that you're going to go
Yes.
over
Hopefully
are
these are
the
good
things, just
counterexamples.
quick
Right.
examples. Everybody uses this
So
type
that
of
was
thing.
astrology, numerology, and so now we'll talk a little more about the occult. So is it true that the Enneagram came from the occult? And again, Tyler Zach has a really good video about the details showing this is not the case. But I just want to say just another side comment on this whole approach. There's a lot of people out there, not a lot, but there are some people who are rejecting the Enneagram from the outset, saying that because of its origin, if you did think it came from astrology or the occult, which I don't think that you can justify that, but even if you did, at the very beginning, it had some people who were in the occult or in astrology who were putting it forth as a method. That means we should reject it. I want you to slow down. I mean, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? I mean, so many scientific and mathematical ideas that we all accept as truth and use every day today have strange roots or roots that combine other or that come from people who came from other backgrounds than what we come from.
Right. Very layered.
I could give you so many examples. I mean, just to give you a couple real quick ones, but like mathematics, algebra, that is a Arabic word, and most of the early thinkers about algebra were Muslim. Does that mean that Christians and Jews should not use algebra?
Or
Of course
people of
not.
any religion.
Or of any faith,
Mhm.
No. They were discovering something that matches up with reality.
Universal truth. Right.
Yeah. The geometry, the theorems of geometry. I mean, so many of those guys who discovered those axioms were Greek and worshipped polytheism.
Mhm.
Does that mean monotheists shouldn't use geometry? I mean, that's ridiculous.
Mhm. Mhm.
Again, from the Greeks, like if you use the word Thursday, that's from Thor's day. May and June, the months, are from Maya and Juno. These are Greek goddesses. Does that mean that you are worshiping these gods of polytheism if you use a calendar? No. Calendar is extremely useful and practical, and it matches up with how the world really works.
Mhm.
And so, and the same could be said for a lot of science. A lot of people don't know this, but Isaac Newton, while he was in some ways coming from a Christian perspective and wrote a lot about the Bible and prophecy, he also was into the occult, and but does that mean we should reject his laws of motion and gravity? Of course not. I mean, he discovered so many great things. And so Kepler, Johannes Kepler, he was an astronomer, a genius. He also came from a Christian background, but he couldn't afford to live on his teacher's salary. And so he practiced astrology and gave people horoscopes because he knew so much about the stars to make money on the side. Does that mean we shouldn't use his 3 laws of planetary motion that have landed us on the moon and are taking us to Mars? Of course not.
Yeah.
You have to learn, again, to eat the meat and spit out the bones. All truth is God's truth. And we don't need to fear the truth. We have to be very careful not to commit a very important mistake in reasoning called the genetic fallacy in logic, which says, you should judge an argument based on the content of the argument and not based on who is presenting it to you or where it comes from.
Yeah.
Because truth is truth, regardless of who is presenting it to you. So you need to ask yourself, am I thinking critically? Am I being careful not to commit the genetic fallacy, not to be prejudiced when I hear an argument by, judging a book by its cover and not looking on the inside and what it contains? Does the Enneagram have anything to say to you? Does it match up with reality when you look closely at your own personality and the way the Enneagram maps out the way the personality types relate to each other? For us, it seems to match and fit the facts.
Yeah.
And it's a useful tool, and it seems to fit well within our Christian worldview. But you have to think through that yourself.
Yeah. If it doesn't fit, or parts of your personality that you read about don't fit, don't allow your inner script to beat you up, because that can happen too, where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm reduced down to this, and this is all I do, and this is my fear.
Right.
But instead, just use it as, hold it a bit lighter than that and say, okay, I'm learning, I'm trying to flow with my family, I'm trying to figure out what I keep getting stuck on, and taking some deep breaths, trying out some different moves. This is what the Enneagram is all about when it's at its best, is helping you to balance, to be healthy, to use your gifts too. And we just love to help you to do that on this show and in the book. And so that's really our heart, is that you would have that space of understanding all the good that you can learn, but not to force that on others, and not to take yourself down or beat yourself up, but to remember grace and love are part
That's
of it
right.
all. Marriage is long and hard.
Yes.
You do need a lot of deep breaths,
Right.
a lot of grace. And at the end of the day, you have to start, I think this helped us the most, was not trying to change each other into like my personality type or yours ultimately, but just, okay, I'm going to love you for who you are. And now, like you said earlier, I have more compassion as to why. Because when you do look at the Enneagram, if you've heard podcasts here before, you certainly know we all have propensities as to not only, like you said, genetics or perhaps epigenetics as we're learning, but things that we just really are prone to, that we want to, solve or account for. But at the end of the day, a lot of the time we just have to be able to say, I give you grace. This is why you're probably this way, but I don't know why. Honestly, some of it, like we said, is nature and nurture.
Right.
So it's just a grace over each other, a general grace.
Yeah. Why do I have the genetics that I have? Why have I had to go through the experiences I've had? I don't know, but we have.
Yeah.
So let's take that and in love, try to work together to help each other to grow, to help each other to be the best you can be,
glow and find your pairings gifts together, because there are beautiful gifts, that things you can do together that nobody else really does the same way. That's because of your individual narratives and nuances outside of Enneagram, but also inside of Enneagram, to have your own types flowing together. That's a beautiful tool that we want you to be able to have. So
where could we learn more about that kind of thing?
Thank you. You can learn more about it from the new book, and you can still get your pre-orders on. So
yes, please. The Enneagram
in marriage, your guide to thriving together in your unique pairing. It's available everywhere. So thank you. Thank you, Wes.
Please, yes,
This is
check it
a
out.
busy
It's super
man. So
useful.
appreciate you coming
It's
on
going to
and
help.
sharing.
It's
Yeah.
really blessed us. It's really helped us to grow in our own marriage and to see how we shine even brighter together because of our unique gifts.
Yes. Okay. Thank you guys so much.
Bye.
Thank you guys so much for just taking in that episode and information with us. I'm so grateful. I hope that wherever you're at in your week, it's life giving to you to remember to stop with me and allow others to find this great tool. Oh my goodness. I feel like that's something that I need to be less self preserving with, like not just me and my people who find this podcast, but people who actually truly need help and want help and are seeking answers. And so I'm grateful for Wes. I'm grateful for you for sticking through this time to learn with us. And I hope as we end today's episode, you can think of one great way or tool that you can take with you from today, even if it's something as simple as remembering that Newton had a lot of great practices and then things that weren't as good about him, but that we still use his laws today. So I hope that just shores you up. I hope that you enjoy the book as we're starting to be able to share out with our launch team. I'm hearing some good feedback, and I hope that you enjoy the stories too. I will share in another episode about all the heart spaces with it, but thank you for being here in my heart space, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.